Welcome to Days of Roar, the Detroit Tigers podcast, brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold, ready to embark into the last 12 games of the season. And guess who's right in the middle of the playoff mix, Evan Petzold? So let's talk about this week. Been pretty fun. Been a lot of good baseball. Been some fun things. What have you been seeing down at Comerica Park?
To answer your question, Mark, the Tigers are in the middle of a postseason race. The vibes are really good at Comerica Park. Everybody is standings watching at this point. They're scoreboard watching. Everybody wants to know what's going on with the Minnesota Twins. Not just fans, but players as well. Everyone's really locked in on what's going on, and the Tigers continue to win. They are doing their job in this process of trying to push for the postseason. They had a 4-2 week. 4-2 record, 2-1 against the Colorado Rockies at Comerica Park, and then 2-1 against the Baltimore Orioles at Comerica Park. 12 games remaining over 2 weeks. The Tigers are right in the thick of it. There were some big games this past week that really stood out to me. 4 of them, actually, that stood out among the 6 games that the Tigers played this week against both the Rockies and the Orioles. The 11-0 win on Tuesday, Keider Montero throwing a complete game shutout. 3 hits, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts, 9 innings, 96 pitches. He faced a minimum 27 batters because of 3 double plays. Keider Montero, first Tiger to throw a complete game since Spencer Turnbull's no-hitter in May 2021. First Tiger to face the minimum batters since Justin Verlander's no-hitter in May 2011. First Tiger to throw a Maddox. That's a complete game shutout on fewer than 100 pitches, named after Hall of Famer Greg Maddux. He's the first Tiger to do it since David Price on June 12, 2015. Shout out to Jake Rogers for his work behind the plate as the catcher. Fastball, slider, curveball, they were all working. It was a great way for the Tigers to set the tone for a 6-game homestand. And then the loss that really was interesting too is it was the 4-2 loss on Thursday to the Rockies. That loss, I think it really hurt the Tigers' postseason chances in the moment. Could have been a series sweep, but the Tigers lost with Tarik Skubal on the mound. Yes, Skubal only gave up 1 run, but the Rockies scored 3 runs off the Tigers' bullpen, including 2 runs in the 9th inning against Jason Foley. That snapped Foley's streak of 18 games and 16 innings without an earned run. He has been outstanding for a while now. The Tigers have lost back-to-back starts by Tarik Skubal. Not Tarik Skubal's fault, but the Tigers have lost in games Tarik Skubal has started back-to-back times. They'll look to snap that streak on Wednesday against the Kansas City Royals. Tarik Skubal, by the way, 2.50 ERA in 29 starts. Seems like he has 2 starts remaining. Maybe a third in the regular season if the Tigers need him in the season finale against the White Sox. If they need him to make the postseason, they're going to call on Tarik Skubal to get the job done. Then in the Orioles series, there were 2 games that stood out to me. The 1-0 win on Friday, the Tigers almost threw a combined perfect game. And then they almost threw a combined no-hitter. Brant Hurter, he led the way with 5 2/3 scoreless innings with 8 strikeouts as the bulk reliever, following Bo Brisky, who opened for the Tigers. The 4 pitchers in that game, Brisky, Hurter, Brennan Hanafy, and Tyler Holton. The first base runner for the Orioles occurred when Brant Hurter walked Adley Rutschman to open the 8th inning, ending a perfect game. And the first hit of the game for the Orioles, Tyler Holton allowed a triple to Gunnar Henderson with 2 outs in the 9th inning. That ended the no-hitter. The sweeper was located middle down. Holton wanted it middle away. If it was down and away, where Holton wanted it, probably would have been rolled over to second base. Instead, it's middle down. Henderson shoots the middle down sweeper down the first base line into the right field corner. But shout out to Tyler Holton for collecting himself and striking out Anthony Santander. That is a dangerous hitter at the plate. He's got 41 home runs this season. And there was a runner on third base in a 1-run game, like a home run, and that game completely flips. Tyler Holton didn't let that triple, the fact that he lost the no-hitter, didn't let that get into his head. He stayed confident. He'd attacked. As a result, the Tigers got the win. And then Sunday, a 4-2 win. Tigers, they won on Friday. They lost on Saturday. So Sunday's game determined which team won the series. Riley Greene hit 2 home runs, both off left-handed pitchers. Hit a homer off Cade Povich in the 3rd inning, and then old friend Gregory Soto in the 8th inning. First homer for Greene against a left-handed starter in his MLB career, which I was surprised to learn that from MLB.com's Jason Beck. I thought it was a big statement win for the Tigers. Adley Rutschman hit the 2-run home run in the 8th inning. to cut the Tigers' lead to 3-2, but Riley Greene responded with his second homer to make it 4-2. There's no quitting the Tigers ever. And that's a testament to their culture. And that's been their culture all season. Even before this winning started, it even goes back to last season. They did show that last season, that never quit attitude, that never quit mindset where they were going to play their full 27 outs. How many times have we heard AJ Hinch say that over the years? He's been setting the groundwork for it. And the Tigers are accomplishing it. They got a 4-2 week. They have an opportunity to make something happen in the upcoming week against the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles. But Mark, what a fun week this was. The Tigers are for real, man. This is a good baseball team, and they continue to play good ball.
You want to have a good baseball team? This is how you learn how to be a good baseball team. You play for real games against for real teams. And even if you don't think the teams you're playing are for real, the level of meaning of each individual game is real for the Tigers. So you can't ever let up. You can't ever make an excuse. Baseball is baseball. What happened Thursday afternoon, part of baseball. It's you couldn't expect Jason Foley to have, unreal luck and unreal unscored upon streak. He already was at 18. Had a little bad luck on Thursday. They got beat. That's baseball, man. They didn't hand him the game. It's just the way things go sometimes. Balls find holes. They find holes for you. They find holes against you. And a shout out, to be clear, Days of Roar, we are never short on people to criticize. And at the same time, I think the one person that we have both always given deference to, always talk about what a great job he does and helps his team win literally every single day. Extremely consistent message, consistent methodology. AJ Hinch. Not, manager of the year this year because the Tigers aren't good enough for him to be manager of the year. But wow, they're not here without AJ Hinch pulling the strings, the puppet master, just managing a pitching staff of, vagabonds almost for the bottom six into one of the greatest stretches of run prevention the Tigers have had in 2 decades. And just a ridiculous amount of winning, Ev. Come on, man. It's about, at the end of the day, winning baseball games. There's no good effort. We put together a good week or two. It's about winning over an extended period of time. And what do we say here at Days of Roar? It's not who you play, it's how you play. And the Tigers have mastered how to play. They keep finding ways to win. They've only scored in like 5 innings in the last 35 innings. And yet they beat Baltimore 2 of 3. And believe me, Baltimore needs these games. They're going to the playoffs, but they'd much prefer to win the division than to come in and be the wild card team. And the Tigers just beat them 2 of 3. They almost perfect gamed them on Friday night. By the way, Brant Hurter, 70.7% first pitch strikes in his time with the Tigers. Pretty unbelievable stat. By the way, Ev, you know who is number 1 in Major League Baseball in first pitch strikes?
Give it to me.
The Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Tigers throw more first pitch strikes than any team in baseball. And that, my friends, is the Chris Fetter mantra. Get ahead, get them out. Pitch economy. All right, let's jump into it. Question 1 of the big 2, what needs to happen for the Tigers to make the postseason?
Pretty simple. The Tigers need to catch the Minnesota Twins. Right now, the Tigers trail the Twins by 2.5 games for the 3rd and final spot in the American League wild card. The Tigers have a 9.9% chance to make the postseason, according to Fangraphs. The New York Yankees, Cleveland Guardians, Houston Astros, Baltimore Orioles, Kansas City Royals, they're all pretty much locked in at this point. The Orioles and the Royals, they are the first 2 wildcard teams right now. And then the Twins are hanging on to the 3rd spot, 2.5 games ahead of the Tigers. But remember, 2.5 games is really 3.5 games because the Twins own the tiebreaker based on the head-to-head record, going 7-6 against the Tigers this season. So the Tigers are technically 3.5 games back in their push for the final wild card spot. The Twins are 79-70 with 13 games remaining. The Tigers are 77-73 with 12 games remaining. Upcoming games for the Twins, Cleveland Guardians, Boston Red Sox. Upcoming games for the Tigers, Kansas City Royals, Baltimore Orioles. Both teams will be tested. Now, the Twins are ahead of the Tigers by 3 losses, which is actually 4 losses when you consider the tiebreaker. So essentially, the Tigers need to make up 4 losses on the Twins in the final 2 weeks of the seasons. Here are a few examples of what could potentially happen. If the Twins finish 7-6, the Tigers must finish 10-2. If the Twins finish 6-7, the Tigers must finish 9-3. If the Twins finish 9-4, the Tigers must finish 12-0. If the Twins finish 4-9, the Tigers must finish 7-5. If the Twins finish 10-3, the Tigers will not be able to pass the Twins in the wild card race. And let's not forget about the Seattle Mariners either. They're alive. They have the pitching to win a lot of games if their offense shows up. The Tigers have the tiebreaker over the Mariners. So that's a good thing. If it ends up being Tigers-Mariners at the very end, the Tigers have that tiebreaker. But if the Twins, Tigers, and Mariners tie, if it's a 3-team tie between those 3 teams, then the Twins advance to the postseason because the Twins have the tiebreaker over both the Tigers and the Mariners. So yes, it's a math game. It really does come down to the numbers. The Tigers, again, they have 3 more losses than the Twins, which is really 4 more losses when you consider the tiebreaker. They cannot tie at the end of the year. They have to be one up on the Twins. So the Tigers have to make up 4 losses on the Twins. You got 2 weeks left to do it. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to see if it happens.
Twins are playing horribly for a team that can just mash, had at one point a really good bullpen, and Pablo Lopez just, being lights out since the All-Star break. They're terrible. It's just hard for me to believe. And now I have a pretty simple theory about, teams playing well or playing poorly, especially coming to the end of a season. And I like to say once you get the stink on you, it's really hard to get it off. And the Twins have the stink on them. So hard to know how they're going to do, but it's quite possible the Twins could put up a 4-9. So the Twins can put up a 4-9. Tigers can put up an 8-4. There's going to be a playoff game that we get to watch here in a few weeks. And it's quite possible that happens. In the meantime, just keep playing ball games, keep trying to win series, keep taking the game one at a time. And it sounds like I've been listening to too much AJ Hinch. It's because I've been listening to too much AJ Hinch. All right, question 2, the big 2. Tigers have won 22 of the last 32 baseball games. What has stood out most about the way they've played? I think this is pretty easy to answer. What's your thoughts?
Can we say everything? Does that count? Because I think that's what I'm going to go with, is pretty much everything. No, look, entering Sunday, here's where the Tigers rank among 30 MLB teams since August 11th. That's when the winning began. 11th in WRC+, 9th in OPS, 9th in batting average, 13th in on-base percentage, 10th in slugging percentage, 17th in walk rate, 25th in strikeout rate. That's the offense. Here's the bad news for the offense. They're 2nd in batting average on balls in play at 320. The league average for BABIP since August 11th, 291. This suggests the Tigers' offense will regress if you're looking at BABIP based on luck. Now, again, BABIP, you can talk about defense, luck, talent level. There's a lot that goes into it. But if you want to look at it as luck, the way that profiles is that the Tigers' offense will slow down, which we have seen recently. We have seen the offense slow down over the last week. Really coming out of that first game against the Rockies, the offense started to slow, especially as we got into the weekend. So maybe that's a little bit of it. They were getting a little bit lucky earlier on in this stretch, and now, things are kind of starting to regress towards the mean. It sure seems that way on offense. As for pitching, first in ERA, with a 2.48 ERA, the Tigers are first among all 30 big league teams since August 11th in ERA. They're 2nd in FIP, they're 8th in expected FIP, they're 4th in walk rate, and they're 19th in strikeout rate. A little bit more bad news, this on the pitching side. Again, 2nd on batting average on balls in play at 246. Again, the league average for BABIP since August 11th is 291. And against Tigers pitching, it's a 246 batting average on balls in play. This suggests that the Tigers pitchers will eventually regress a little bit. Maybe more balls will be falling into holes. I think BABIP is like an interesting concept to talk about. If you read MLB.com, why it's useful, it talks about how, it can provide some context when evaluating pitchers and hitters. Obviously, the league average BABIP typically around 300. Pitchers who have allowed a really high percentage of hits on balls in play, they typically regress to the mean and vice versa. So if you don't allow, a lot of hits on balls in play, well, eventually probably going to regress towards the mean. In the same way, but just flip-flops. So, it's interesting to look at it that way. But again, like I said, it does account for defense and in talent level as well. And, you can view it as luck, sure, but the Tigers have played pretty good defense behind their pitchers. So it's no surprise that, the pitching staff has done a good job of limiting the batting average on balls in play. A consistently high BABIP is hard to maintain for hitters. A consistently low BABIP is hard to maintain for pitchers. Again, that suggests that in the future, the Tigers offense might not get as many hits, and the Tigers pitchers might give up more hits than what they've been giving up. We'll see if that actually happens. It's something to monitor in the final 2 weeks. I've been tracking the BABIP metric for about a week now, and the Tigers, especially on the pitching side, they are not showing any signs of slowing down on the pitching side in particular. And that's what stands out the most to me. Going back to August 11th, Sean Gunther, 0.00 ERA in 11 innings. Tyler Holton, 0.44 ERA in 20.1 innings. Brennan Hanafy, 1.23 ERA in 14.2 innings. Shelby Miller, 1.46 ERA in 12.1 innings. Jason Foley, 1.46 ERA in 12.1 innings. Will Vest, 1.54 ERA in 11.2 innings. Bo Brisky, 2.20 ERA in 16.1 innings. All those guys pitching in, mid-leverage, high leverage, low leverage, all 1 or 2 inning relievers. Those are the ERA leaders since August 11th. After those guys that I just mentioned, you have Tarek Skubal and Brant Hurter, Ty Madden, Brian Sammons, and then we get into the Kenta Maeda territory. And like that's impressive to me. That is so impressive to me. The bullpen has been absolutely nailed. Now, I'm not talking about the bulk reliever guys. I'm talking about openers and closers and 7th, 8th, 9th inning guys. That's a hat tip to AJ Hinch, isn't it?
It's a hat tip to AJ Hinch because the puppet master knows when to hold them and when to fold them. He gets people in the best spots for leverage, optimizes guys, knows when to bring in the bulk guy, when to pull the bulk guy. Notice yesterday, he pulls Madden early. Okay. Today, he pulls Montero early. He's just so good at it. And he's a big reason why they've gone on this run. The other thing, I'm a big believer that when you have special years of pitching on an individual basis for pitchers, you can go look, when guys have great years, they always suppress BABIP. So the idea that they're going to regress to the mean, well, it may not regress to the mean till 2025 the way they're going. So I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying they may not soon. The other thing, they got 2 guys hitting the ball pretty well. That's it. 2. They have one who's basically driving the bus, changing the oil on the bus, making the bus go fast, pretty much everything about the bus. His name is Riley Greene, 327, 393, 653 in the month of September, 4 Jimmy Jacks, 13 RBI. He's doing just about everything. Cole Keith, also not super productive from an OBP or slugging percentage, but just a lot of clutch RBI hits, especially going the other way, hitting 319 for the month, 15 for 47. Kerry Bonds Carpenter has chipped in a few bombs, has not otherwise been too dangerous, but the bottom line, Tigers have not exactly stung the baseball, but they've stung it enough at the right times to win baseball games. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to talk to our favorite Twins beat writer, Bobby Nightengale Jr. We'll be back in 60.
All right, I'd like to welcome Bobby Nightengale Jr., the Minnesota Twins beat writer from the Minnesota Star Tribune, to the Days of Roar podcast. We talked to Bobby coming out of spring training about how the Tigers and Twins could be the top teams in the American League Central. Fast forward more than 5 months, the Tigers and Twins are competing for the third and final spot in the AL wildcard. Bobby, thanks for coming back on the podcast with 2 weeks remaining in the regular season.
Yeah, my pleasure. Definitely didn't expect Kansas City to be the team that they are, and Cleveland, I expected them to fade at some point, and they never did. So kind of two teams that blew my expectations out of the water.
Same here, especially with Kansas City. But for the Twins, what's the vibe like right now around the Twins? The Twins have lost 17 of their last 26 games. They had a 70-53 record in 123 games before that. What's the vibe like? How aware are the Twins that the Tigers are breathing down their necks at this point? How are things going in Minneapolis right now?
Yeah, it's been rough. It's been one of those nothing's gone right for like the last month, and they're able to, finish a series against the Cincinnati Reds with a win that felt much needed. That they would have got swept at home by them, but, they would have been in a dark place. I mean, they still have a big road trip coming up. They'll go to Cleveland for 4 games, and they'll see Boston for 3 games. So difficult road trip coming up, but it's one of those, they have 3 rookies in the rotation. None of those guys are able to provide many innings. The bullpen's overtaxed, and it hasn't pitched well since the All-Star break, having a really tough time scoring. They just got Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton back from the injured list. That was kind of the positive news of the weekend, but outside of that, it's just been everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, it seemed like.
Yeah, so a lot going wrong right now for the Twins, but can you help me understand just like, and you kind of hinted at some of it, but what are the strengths and weaknesses of this team? Like if Tigers fans are watching and they're starting to pay attention to more Twins games, what are they looking at both from the standpoint of, hey, here are the strengths of this team and here are the weaknesses where maybe this team could crumble?
Yeah, I mean, right now it seems like 2 out every 5 days they have Pablo Lopez and Bailey Ober in their rotation. Those are the days they feel like they should win, and it's almost deflating when they don't win because it's just the 3 rookies that they have. Simeon Woods Richardson's one of them. It feels like he's hit a wall, hasn't completed 5 innings in his last 3 starts. David Festa and Zebby Matthews are the other 2 young starters, and it's tough to throw those guys right into a playoff race. It's their first time doing it, but they're just not giving many innings. I would say, kind of the weakness is they're not scoring very much in the early innings against opposing starting pitchers. That was kind of the strength in the middle of the summer, and they've really gone away from it. It's just one of those, seems like everyone's slumping at the same time. Royce Lewis has kind of had a rough summer. That's surprised them a little bit. And now, they were missing Carlos Correa. They were missing Byron Buxton. Willie Castro, he was an all-star this year, former Tiger, and I think he only has 4 or 5 hits this month. So that's kind of been the theme, is just kind of they all slumped at the same time. And they're not scoring early, so they're falling behind in games, and they don't really have and I feel like they don't have the bullpen, especially the non-high leverage guys, to stay in games. It seems like as soon as they get down 4-2, one of the relievers or a starter will fall in trouble, then they end up going down 9-2, and they're unable to come back and climb out of it. So that's been the bad thing. I mean, defensively, they should be better with Buxton and Correa back. That should make a big difference. And when they have Pablo Lopez and Bailey Ober on the mound, those are definitely games that they feel like they're favored to win any of those games just because those 2 pitchers have been pretty much lights out since the All-Star break.
Sounds like the Twins have a lot of the same issues the Tigers had before Riley Greene and Kerry Bonds Carpenter came back off the injured list. It's awful hard to play with your 2 biggest bats not in the lineup. And then when you lose a big part of your rotation, one thing I think we can say safely is the Tigers have navigated the idea much better than the Twins have. Tigers have also been starting 3 guys from AAA in their rotation out of every 5 days. And they've been, actually fortunate in the way they've optimized those pitchers. I'm sure you've seen that they've used an opener in front of them almost every single time to get the lineup turned around before they face them. And they've had a pretty great record when those 3 guys have thrown. So you got 2 weeks to go. Buxton and Correa, especially Correa, has always been, in high leverage situations, coming down the stretch or in the playoffs. Carlos Correa has always been known to step up. What do you think is going to go on here? And share with us a little bit who the Twins are going to play the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question is if Correa can kind of get back to the level he was. He was an all-star in the first half, probably having one of the best offensive seasons of his career. He said that's what kind of made it really tough that the injury happened the way it did. just because he was kind of excited to see what his numbers were going to look like over the course of a full season if he stayed healthy. But battling plantar fasciitis. So he said he's still playing through pain. I mean, I heard him say on a scale of like the 1 to 10 pain scale, he's still a 4 most days. It was a 9 a couple weeks ago. So he feels improved, but he's still playing hurt and isn't going to be able to play every game. Same thing with Byron Buxton. I mean, he's probably playing at 60%. So it's one of those guys kind of rushed back from the injured list, seeing the team kind of slide down the standings. I mean, they felt pretty safe. A month ago, they were 10 games up on the Tigers, and, they had a big lead on the Red Sox too. So they felt like they're in a good spot. And then when they started sliding down, it just turned into like, okay, now we're not going to do a rehab assignment like we initially planned. We're going to push those guys back as much as possible, and we'll figure it out on the fly with the expanded roster. So they're hoping he can step up. I mean, I think just the defense those two provide, if nothing else. I mean, Buxton's defense and centers, incredible. Grant's the best shortstop they've had in a while. So even if they'll hit right away, I think defensively, you're not going to see some of the same mistakes that some of their younger guys are making. But tough schedule to finish. I mean, they have 4 against Cleveland and 3 against Boston on this upcoming road trip next week. They'll return home. They get 3 against Miami, which will be the easiest part. And they finish with 3 against the Orioles. So the Orioles, the Orioles swept the Twins earlier in the season. So tough one to finish out on. And I think the Tigers have the White Sox, or someone has the White Sox to end it. So could add some intrigue in the final weekend too.
Yeah, the Tigers do have the White Sox to finish up, so that will be interesting. You mentioned Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa. What exactly have they been dealing with injury-wise? It sounds like they're not even 100% healthy, and I don't know, are they going to be able to play every day? You think they're going to be able to stay healthy? What does that kind of look like? And then does the vibe of the team improve with those guys back? Does it feel better being around the Twins with those guys in the lineup, or is it still kind of the same odd feeling of hey, this team really isn't producing?
Yeah, I mean, so Correa's dealing with plantar fasciitis. He had it in one foot last year. Now it's the other foot. The issue this year is it's the same foot that kind of flunked his medicals with the Giants and Mets, causing them to take back those $300 million contracts. So a little bit more concerned in the foot this year than it was last year when he mostly played through it. So that's kind of been the big concern. He's wearing a different shoe and not going to be able to play every day going forward. Byron Buxton's been dealing with a hip injury. Kind of aggravated it when he was on a rehab assignment last week. So that's kind of been the concern, is how much can he swing on it. And he's going to miss games here and there. They kind of have it mapped out where, the kind of on a schedule where maybe they'll play 75% of the games the rest of the way, something like that. That's what I think in my head. But that's a concern when you feel it on a swing, and it could pop up at another time when you're not feeling 100%. And then I just think the mood-wise, I mean, all those young guys were struggling at the same time. They've tried a lot of different things. I mean, they've had all the team meetings. Rocco Baldelli, the manager, chewed them out after one game when they got swept in Kansas City last weekend. They've tried the let's play loose and try these different things. They have a rally sausage that they keep in the clubhouse and then in the dugout that they celebrate with home runs. It was kind of like the thing they bonded over during a 12-game winning streak in May. It was gone for a few months, and suddenly it's back in the dugout. So they've really tried all the steps and all the plays that they can, tough love, encouragement, everything. And so they've been searching for a while. I just think having the veteran guys, especially Correa and Buxton, guys who've been to the playoffs a ton in their careers, I think that's probably the biggest thing, is they just miss that leadership, because they weren't on the previous road trips either. And you could tell some of the young guys, it was just so much pressing. I mean, guys were chasing so many pitches off the plate and strikeouts were way up. So I think that was the biggest issue. And with them returning, I think it's just like a calming presence for a lot of the young guys.
The other big bat we have to ask you about, Royce Lewis. Does he have an incredible end-of-season run in him, or do you think fatigue is setting in? Where is he at, both health-wise and production-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did hit a wall fatigue-wise. I mean, it's the longest he's played consistently. He's played maybe 2 months interrupted for the first time since 2019. But I think that took a toll. Plus, he's in his second season, and pitchers know how to adjust to him a little bit better. And he still has a knack for the big moments. He still swings a big bat, but it's like it's like exit velocity is down, not getting as much. He's not doing as much damage. Even when he is hovering, it seems like it's just barely getting out. So that is a concern. That how is he going to hold up without any off days, because they can afford to give him 3 days here and reset for the final weeks of the season. So probably not the Royce Lewis that at the beginning of the season, how excited they were, how much he was kind of dominating to start off his career in the big leagues. But I do think that's something to watch, is just, can he get back on track? Because if he can, I mean, he's infectious. I mean, his energies, he's one of those guys that if he plays well, the team usually follows. But for the past month, he hasn't played nowhere near where he needs to be.
Bobby, who needs to step up, in the rotation and in the bullpen? The Twins had, for a long stretch, the last couple of years, a really, really solid, productive bullpen, and it just seems like they've lost some of their mojo, some of the earlier guys for the whole year, but, now even some of the back end is struggling. I saw they brought Durant in the seventh inning the other day, and it still didn't help them. So what's exactly going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partially guys just wearing down. Like, Joan Durant hasn't been his usual self. Like, he can throw 104. He hasn't gotten close to that this year. He's more like 101, 102, which still, it was really hard, but it's still not his best. Griffin Jackson's been their best reliever. He's the guy they're going to go to against the middle of the order, no matter what, in big situations, whether it's the 8th inning, 9th inning. That's the guy they want to set up for. But he's probably going to have to pitch multiple innings in a lot of appearances now, and probably Durant too. So they're kind of low on dependable late inning options. They have about 3 guys they really trust: Durant, Griffin Jackson, Cole Sands. Outside of that, they have a couple of guys who are trying to find it, have the stuff to be really good at the back end, but haven't been good lately. And then probably 4 or 5 guys in the bullpen that have never pitched in the back end of the bullpen, and hard to see them trusting them with a playoff spot on the line. So they're kind of in a tight situation where, you have the rotation that has been struggling, and then you only have probably 3 back-end relievers that you feel really good about.
Sounds like the type of losing streaks and frustration Tiger fans have been used to for a decade, and we feel for you, but we don't feel for you that much. So you have 12 left. We have 12 left. You have 13 left, I think. How many wins do you think it's going to take for the Twins to cement the playoff spot? And once you get in, it's a new season, and you do have some players that have done some great things in the playoffs. So getting in is everything. But how many wins do you think it's going to take for the Twins to, ensure themselves a spot? You got a thought about that?
Yeah, I would say I think if they go 7-6 the rest of the way, so they win 7 more, they do. The fortunate thing for their part is they do have the tiebreaker on virtually everybody. They still have the series against Boston next weekend, that 3-gamer. The only way they lose the tiebreaker to Boston is if they get swept. So if they win 1 game, they win that tiebreaker, then they have it over the Tigers, Mariners, and Red Sox. So it's a decent lead. I mean, I think 2.5 on paper, but 3.5 with the tiebreaker, with 13 to go. So if they win 7 more, I would say that's, it would take an incredible streak from any of the other teams to surpass them if they just go 7-6 the rest of the way.
If the Twins finish 7-6, the Tigers must finish 10-2 to get into the postseason. So you're right, 7-6 for the Twins. You got to be feeling pretty good about that if they're able to do it. I don't see the Tigers winning 10 of 12 games, but they've been red hot. Who knows? Bobby, one other question I had for you too was this Twins rotation. Obviously, you mentioned, Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober. How big was the loss of Joe Ryan? And what does it kind of mean for guys like David Festa, Zebby Matthews, Simeon Woods Richardson? Like, can any of those 3 guys, any of them showing signs of stepping up and actually becoming like a frontline starter, or are they guys who are like really, really struggling and there's no hope for them at this point? Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge loss, especially it came like a week after the trade deadline. They didn't do anything at the trade deadline. I mean, the one reliever they traded for, they ended up designating for assignment within 3 weeks. So that was a big miss. I mean, they had a chance to add there, tried to do it in the offseason too. It didn't really add. The one pitcher they added, Anthony Disclafani, didn't throw a single pitch this year before he had Tommy John. So kind of a missed opportunity. They lose Joe Ryan, who was pitching extremely well. They felt really good about their top 3. And we're like, okay, we can ride those guys. And those are the 3 that we're going to start in a playoff series. So now, I mean, Simeon Woods Richardson, he's been really good this year. I just think he's hit a wall. His stuff has been down for like 4 starts in a row, truly struggling just to get through 4 innings consistently. So, I mean, he's battling, but it's not the same. And like David Festa, he's probably the guy that if they were in a 3-game playoff series, I think he'd probably be the game 3 type starter, but he just isn't great at pitching 2-3 times through a lineup yet. I mean, that's something he just still has to learn and go through at the big league level, and it hasn't really happened. So he has a really tight leash. I think he only went 3 innings today. So, they're keeping short with him. And then Zebby Matthews, he started the year in high A and worked his way to the big leagues, but only made 2 or 3 starts in AAA and then made it to the big leagues. And you can tell he kind of lacks that upper minor league experience, trying to go through a lineup and leaves a few pitches over the middle, they get crushed. So that they don't feel great about their options. I mean, it's one of those, if they win games when they're when it's not a Bailey Ober or Pablo Lopez start, it feels like a doubly extra important win. And it's probably one where the bats came alive.
Before we get you out of here, got to ask, will the Tigers catch the Twins? Yes or no, and why?
It's a good question. I mean, I keep thinking like the Tigers shouldn't be the number one competition. I mean, you look at they traded away at the deadline. Where would they be if they still had like Jack Flaherty and stuff? But, the Twins have played terribly against Cleveland this year. I think only 2 wins against them. So I think the Twins, like if you made me guess, I think they're only going to win maybe 4 or 5 games the rest of the way. So I think the door's open. And it just, can the Tigers hold on until they play the White Sox? Because I think that should be 3 wins there. They'll final weekend. So should be able to apply pressure if they can keep it close. Mariners have great pitching too, but I'd say the Twins hold off and get the last one. I think the tiebreaker scenario helps them so much, just having that extra game in their advantage.
To your point, even if the Twins finish 4-9, the Tigers must finish 7-5. So it's going to be tough either way. But all right, Bobby, I think that's all we have for you. We really appreciate your insight into the Twins. We'll see what happens in the final 2 weeks. I have a feeling only one of us is going to be covering postseason games. It might be you, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for checking in with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bobby.
Everyone, that was Bobby Nightengale Jr., the Minnesota Twins beat writer for the Minnesota Star Tribune. There's more to discuss about this past week for the Tigers, including a top prospect making his AAA debut. But first, let's take a break.
All right, we're back. Thanks to Bobby Nightengale. And I hope everybody listens to that 20 minutes, because if you didn't think the playoffs were possible after listening to the Twins beat writer, I feel encouraged. It's actually worse than we thought.
They're in a dark place, aren't they?
Oh, it's a place that we understand well. We've been there for a decade, so I mean we kind of understand it. But anyways, interesting week coming up. Got to go to KC. Got to go to Baltimore. There's going to be some angry teams who have things to play for, but it seems like we've played a few of those and done well. Got any thoughts about this upcoming week, Ev?
Yeah, 2 weeks, 12 games remaining, but here's what we have coming up for the next 6 games. 3 games against the Kansas City Royals at Kauffman Stadium, Monday to Wednesday, off day Thursday. Then 3 games against the Baltimore Orioles at Camden Yards, Friday to Sunday. Here's who the Tigers have to face, which I think this is actually pretty interesting. Against the Royals, Seth Lugo, Cole Ragans, Alec Marsh. Against the Orioles, Corbin Burns, Cade Povich, Albert Suarez. Pretty tough pitchers. When you look at Seth Lugo, Cole Ragans, Corbin Burns, those are 3 really difficult pitchers to face. If you are the Tigers and you could steal one of those games, you probably feel pretty good about it, and you feel good about your chances against Alec Marsh, Albert Suarez, but those guys are not easy pitchers to face either. This is going to be a really tough 6 games. All these games are tough at this point. Look, I mean, this is a Tigers team that is pushing for the playoffs, but I do think that when you look at the pitching matchups, Seth Lugo, Cole Ragans, Corbin Burns, like it's going to really tell us a lot about these Tigers. We'll see if they can hang in there. The Seth Lugo, Cole Ragans back-to-back, that's probably the toughest pitchers the Tigers are going to face back-to-back. The toughest they faced in a really long time. I'd have to go back and look and see who they faced previously. But like facing those 2 guys one day after the next, that's the situation where the Tigers could drop both of those games, and they can't at this point. They cannot afford to lose both of those games. I'll be very interested to see how they come out against both Seth Lugo and Cole Ragans. Tarek Skubal pitches against Alec Marsh on Wednesday, so the Tigers don't get the Skubal advantage against either Lugo or Ragans. It's going to be interesting. Those are going to be 2 tough games to start things off in Kansas City, and they very well could be tone setters one way or the other for the 6-game road trip.
The other part that I don't think people have been paying enough attention to, against left-handed pitching, I mean, to beat Povich today was pretty sweet, but you also beat Povich today because Riley Greene hit 2 Jimmy Jacks on the left-handed pitcher. The right-handed bats in the Tiger lineup in the last month, not real good. Not getting any production out of catcher, and I want to be very clear about this. I could care less about that. The 2 of them have navigated the pitching staff like 2 fighter pilot guys doing missions in war. They have been unbelievable. So the fact that they're not hitting is almost irrelevant to me. I could care less. They've been so good at sequencing and guiding the pitching staff, and that's why the Tigers are winning. So if you're mad at Dylan Dingler going 4 for like 800, stop being mad, because he's been outstanding behind the plate.
Let's not forget, Dylan Dingler had caught the near perfect game, near no-hitter. Dylan Dingler caught that game where 4 different pitchers combined for a near no-hitter. And then also, let's not forget, Jake Rogers caught the Keider Montero Maddox, right? The complete game shutout under 100 pitches. So there's going to be no shaming of Jake Rogers or Dylan Dingler because of what the pitching staff has done. Don't care what they're hitting. They're getting the job done behind the plate. That's what matters. They are catching winners. That's what AJ Hinch cares about. That's what we care about.
Now, should you be concerned that Andy Ibanez is 11 for his last 64? Oh, hell yes. Hell yes. That was a bat against left-handers that you could count on, and you're not counting on it too much these days, okay? I mean, Matt Vierling is 11 for 42 in the month of September. He's got 4 runs batted in, okay? You need guys. Justin Henry Malloy has done virtually nothing when he's been given opportunities. So you're going to need some production. You're going to need some left-handers to actually contribute. I saw Kerry Bonds Carpenter actually hit a homer off a left-hander that was pretty big. But, guys like Cole Reagans, it's going to take everything in the trick bag to beat, especially if the right-hand hitters are not going to do too much. So one of Days of Roar's favorite starting pitchers, Reese Olson, scheduled to return from a right shoulder strain. Got a feeling he leads off the KC series. Is that your premonition about when he's going to throw here ever? No.
Yeah, so the Tigers are planning to activate Reese Olson for the Kansas City Royals series. They haven't determined whether or not he's going to start or what game he's going to start or when he's going to pitch. But when you look at what the pitching lines up as, it's TBA on Monday, Casey Mize on Tuesday, Tarek Skubal on Wednesday. TBA very well could be Reese Olson. It sure seems like that's going to be the case. I kind of do wonder if they're going to get creative in the way in which they use Reese Olson when you consider the fact that he's not stretched out. He only made 2 rehab starts with AAA Toledo. He's coming back from a right shoulder strain. I think in a perfect world, Reese Olson, maybe he gets 1 more rehab start. But again, this isn't a perfect world. The Tigers are pushing for the playoffs. They don't have the luxury of being a team that's at the very, very top, already locked in, ready to go. And they're also not a team that's at the bottom of the American League anymore. So because they're not at the bottom of the American League and because they're not at the top of the American League, they can't waste time getting Reese Olson back. They're going to put the gas pedal down, getting him back now. But he only went 3 innings in his last start for AAA Toledo. In that start, he threw 45 pitches. So he's not going to be built up to go 7 innings if they need him to go 7 innings. I wonder if they get creative. Maybe they use an opener. Maybe they do an opener and then a second reliever, and then they, go to Reese Olson for, kind of that bulk reliever type role. Maybe they just start him. They could do that too. I'll be fascinated to see what they do on Monday with him. It could just be an easy start, but at the same time, because of the limitations with both the innings and the pitch count, maybe the Tigers get creative. Maybe they get creative to help handle Bobby Witt Jr., who's going to be right there at the top of that Kansas City Royals lineup. But good news is Reese Olson coming back, hasn't pitched for the Tigers since July 20th. It's going to be a big bonus to get him back in the rotation or on the pitching staff just in general. A 3.23 ERA in 103 innings and 19 starts before he went down with the injury. Secondary pitches are nasty. Yeah, Reese Olson's really good. Tigers going to be glad to have him back.
I'm going to make a guess. I got a feeling they probably only throw him 60 pitches max, so it's 50 to 60 pitches. And I wouldn't be shocked just for this particular start if they used an opener in front of him, try to set things up for him and, let him try to get out 5 to 15 or something along those lines like they've been doing, see what he's got. I'm also going to be fascinated to see who gets demoted, who gets IL'd, what they're going to come up with to figure this part out. So,
well, to tell you, I don't want to break the news, but Ricky Vanasco
is going to get demoted.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that makes sense. I think they saw what they needed to see from Vanasco and they probably liked it. and they got a few games of it.
Maybe I'm going out on a limb, but he was leaving the ballpark with his luggage, not headed towards the team plane, but headed
Evan Petzold, breaking news.
Just observing, that's all.
I was hoping Kenta Maeda came down with like a stomach virus or something for the rest of the year, but unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. All right, well, I'm excited to see what Reese can do, and it's obviously a step up. I think it's time we had a little discussion about one Riley Greene, whose BREF WAR is going to go over 5 and whose Fangraphs WAR will go close to 4. He's been absolutely nails in the month of September after a really troubling August when he first came back, but he looks like he's just on everything, just eviscerating mistakes. And we've endured lots of different times of Riley Greene, but somehow it just doesn't shock either one of us, I don't think, that he's stepped up and is really single-handedly leading the charge offensively in the month of September when the games have been most important.
Yeah, especially what happened on Sunday when he crushes a 2-run homer off Cade Povich in the 3rd inning, and then he launches a solo homer off Gregory Soto in the 8th inning, both those guys being left-handed pitchers. Riley Greene has 23 home runs in 125 games this season. He was a first-time All-Star. He's made headlines. He's been red hot, throughout the season at certain points. He's also went through some mini slumps, but he always comes back out of them. There's never a doubt. Here's what AJ Hinch said after Sunday's game. I thought it was actually pretty cool. Here's AJ Hinch.
He's not a finished product. I know the All-Star season can make it feel that way. He's still learning, growing, developing, and getting, more and more comfortable, with his game plan. I thought he did a good job today with that specifically, and staying with it. He's a tremendous player as is, but he's still got room to grow, and that's the exciting part about him. He's a continuous learner. He works his tail off, and he's always in the middle of big things for us.
I think that speaks volumes about Riley Greene, not only who he is right now, but who he can continue to be. Riley Greene is a guy who, when he doesn't chase, when he sticks to his approach, when he sticks to his plan, he knows exactly what he wants to do. And if it's a certain pitch in a certain location from a certain pitcher, and that's the pitch he's hunting, if he can lay off all other pitches and just focus on that pitch that he wants to do damage on, if he can stick to that approach, Riley Greene is going to have better numbers in the future than he's even had this year. And I believe that because we've seen it at times when Riley is locked in and when Riley is red hot, it's because he's sticking to his plan and taking it into the game. He's not letting the moment get too big. He's not chasing pitches that are down below the zone. He's taking those pitches as opposed to chasing them. And there's a huge difference there. And that allows him, when he gets that pitch that he wants in his spot, he doesn't miss it. So when Riley's locked in, Riley's really dangerous. My big question is going to be 12 games left. Which Riley Greene is going to show up? Because we've seen good and great Riley Greene. We've also seen ground out Riley Greene, where he gets a lot of ground outs to the right side of the field. Now, we haven't seen that as much as we have in years past, but it's still in there every once in a while, and it'll flare up for a few games at a time, and then he's able to shake it. He finds something, and he gets back into it. The Tigers cannot afford for ground out Greene to show up at any point. They have to have the good or the great version of Riley Greene, which is what they've gotten ever since August ended. Turn the page, got to September, and he's been the good version and the great version of Riley Greene. They need as much of that as they can in the last 12 games if they want to make the postseason.
My question is, now that Baltimore's seen him, and God knows Kansas City has seen him plenty of times, it wouldn't shock me teams start pitching around him a little bit more, especially knowing how locked in he is. And that's going to mean that Matt Fearling, Kerry Bounce Carpenter, Cole Keith, they're all going to have to swing a little hotter bat. I mean, Colt's been really coming through, especially with 2 out and runners in scoring position. But you're going to need some other people to contribute here if you're going to win games against good teams. And they're going to play 2 good teams here in the next 6 days. All right, let's talk a little bit about Keider Montero. 3.33 ERA over the last 51 in 1/3 innings. Last 9 starts dating back to August 1st. Less swing and miss, more easy outs. A pretty damn good job. Almost every single time out. I mean, the consistency, I think he's had 1 poor start out of the last 9. And at a time when they needed him most, he's come through huge for them.
So I would like to apologize to Keider Montero because on last week's episode, we talked about which pitcher are you more concerned about down the stretch? Which starter, Casey Mize or Keider Montero? And I referenced some of the inconsistencies that we've seen in Montero throughout this season. Granted, those inconsistencies were from earlier this season, but there were still some starts that led me to believe, hey, you know what, maybe this guy is going to eventually get hit around. Even a team like the Orioles on Sunday, heavy left-handed hitters, so many left-handed hitters in that lineup. And he did a great job. Now, it wasn't perfect, but he did a good job of getting a lot of rollover ground outs to the right side of the infield. And then, you know what? There were some doubles in there. There were some singles mixed in, but he pitched around trouble. Keider Montero has exceeded my expectations, specifically over the past week. I went Casey Mize. I said, you know what? I'm more worried about Keider Montero. I'm not as worried about Casey Mize because Casey Mize has, he's shown that he has like a bulldog mentality, willing to pitch even without swing and miss. He grinds through starts, and he does a really good job of it. I thought Casey Mize maybe would be the one who wouldn't, have the crooked number put up against him, whereas Montero might have been more susceptible to that. And I was wrong. Keider Montero has proven this week that this guy is the real deal. I mean, you go out and you throw a complete game shutout and you do it on, fewer than 100 pitches. And then the way that he was able to just navigate the Orioles lineup, so many left-handed hitters in that lineup, and he's just maneuvering his way around. And there were a ton of balls to the right side of the field. Some of them were doubles to the corner, sure, but there were also a lot of them that were just ground out to second base over and over and over again. He's doing a good job of pitching to weak contact and just pitching to contact in general and then allowing the defense to do their work. He's not chasing strikeouts with his curveball or with his slider. He's just locating pitches where they're being called. And that is also a testament, again, to what guys like Dylan Dingler and Jake Rogers have been able to do behind the plate, calling pitches. They are doing a great job calling games. And I've talked to some of the pitchers about, these catchers and what they're doing. And the pitchers had told me, we're just throwing the ball where these guys call it. So it's really good on Montero. He's not doing too much. He's not trying to do too much. He's doing a great job of just pitching to where the catchers are calling the pitches. And it's working because the catchers have a good game plan. Keider Montero is executing. Major hat tip to him for getting the job done. Man, I can't say I saw it coming. I did not. So again, he's exceeded my expectations, and hopefully he keeps it going because this has been a great success story, especially as of late.
The usual kudos to the law firm of Fetter London Nieves. Keider's throwing his slider a little harder, a little tighter shape. Got an emerging change now. That change is something I'm really keeping my eye on because that starts coming through for him next year. That's really going to be something interesting to watch. We've already seen he can win. Now the question is, can he win all the time? Casey Mize, interesting fact, last outing, 8 splits in 1 inning. Jakey Rogers on the call there. Never thrown that many splits. Never thrown that many splits in an inning. At the same time, maybe the worst slider I've ever seen him have, which one got hammered before he left. And I'll be interested to see if he can improve upon that. We're going to find out pretty quickly. It is a ballpark that does hold things in Kansas City. It's hard to hit one out in KC. So talk to me a little bit about Brant Hurter because it is just quite an amazing story.
Yeah, so you mentioned the law firm of Fetter Lund Nieves. How about we add Doug Bachler, the AAA pitching coach, to that mix as well for getting these guys ready to come up to the big leagues and perform. The Brant Hurter story is incredible, just to kind of lay the groundwork for what he's done in the big leagues. 8 games he's pitched in, most of them as a bulk reliever, 7 of them as a bulk reliever, 1 of them as a traditional starter. It's a 2.56 ERA in 38 2/3 innings, just 5 walks in 37 strikeouts, 5 walks in 38 2/3 innings. Brant Hurter has always been a guy who has thrown strikes. That has been his MO his entire career. He did it a ton last season in Double-A Erie. He really impressed the Tigers in spring training, especially AJ Hinch, with his strike throwing there in camp and really made a name for himself. He was the guy that the Tigers were keeping close tabs on. And then he went to Toledo, and it was really bizarre. He wasn't throwing strikes. He was struggling to get out of innings. He just wasn't pitching to contact. It was a lot of long innings, high pitch count. It wasn't very good. And so what happened was Doug Bachler, the AAA pitching coach, he went to Brant Hurter for a bullpen session and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. we're going to add a little bit of a little rock in your delivery. It's the very beginning of his delivery, and it was a mechanical tweak, a small mechanical tweak to the beginning of his delivery that changed everything. It's the reason why Brant Hurter has been able to throw so many strikes. So here's how it works. He takes a small step forward with his lead leg, then he rocks his hands forward, and then simultaneously lifts his lead leg and his hands to get loaded on his back leg. The front to back motion, it's pretty much like cradling a baby. Imagine that. After that, he throws the pitch like normal. It's just to get him in rhythm in his delivery, to get him in sync. So he was able to repeat his delivery over and over and over again. Same delivery. Then he was able to figure out, okay, here's how I make adjustments from pitch to pitch. Because if the delivery wasn't in sync and he was all out of whack, he didn't really understand where he needed to make adjustments to locate his pitches. And so by syncing up the delivery, he was then able to make adjustments in start, pitch by pitch. And I think that's just incredible. And that's all Doug Bachler in AAA Toledo making that happen. So we love to talk about Chris Fetter. We love to talk about Robin Lund. We love to talk about Juan Nieves, and rightfully so. Those guys, I mean, they are just incredible as, the Tigers pitching coaches. Like, they're the ones who are leading the way here. They're the masterminds behind a lot of what goes on. Well, let's not forget about Doug Bachler, AAA pitching coach. He's the reason why Brant Hurter is filling up the strike zone. Tons of first pitch strikes, tons of strikes in general. He is unafraid of throwing the ball in the zone. Hat tip to Brant Hurter for the fearlessness, but also hat tip to Doug Bachler for getting him right.
Well, when a lot of people like to say, what a good job Scott Harris has done, I like to say what a good job Ryan Garko has done. So we'll leave that for the offseason to have a discussion about. All right, before we get out of here, we need to spend a moment, reference the fact that today Jackson Jobe, first start in AAA, seemed to have similar issues from when the few times he has struggled this year. It's mostly due to command. A lot better hitters in AAA than AA. Wasn't great, wasn't terrible. Got any thoughts about it?
Yeah, so Jackson Jobe made his AAA debut Saturday, and 4 runs, 8 hits, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts across 4 innings. He needed 83 pitches to complete 4 innings. So when you're giving up 8 hits and you also are giving up 2 walks and it takes you 83 pitches to get through the 4 innings, that's not great. He allowed a 2-run home run to Devin Mann on a middle 97-mile-an-hour fastball in the second inning. He worked around a single and a walk in the first inning, but then the Omaha Storm Chasers, the AAA affiliate of the Kansas City Royals, they scored in the other 3 innings, 2 runs in the second, 1 run in the third, 1 run in the fourth. Command issues for sure. He threw 30 four-seam fastballs, 22 sweepers, 19 cutters, and 12 changeups. He had 9 whiffs on 42 swings. That's just a 21.4% whiff rate. But he did get swing and miss on all of his pitches. 3 fastballs, 3 sweepers, 2 cutters, and 1 changeup. The fastball averaged 96.4 miles an hour. So the velo is there, no doubt. But it wasn't just command issues. It was also like the exit velocity, 93.9 miles an hour. That was the average exit velocity on 16 balls in play. That means they hit him hard. Jackson Jobe got hit hard. And he also struggled to throw strikes, and wasn't great. But you know what? It was a first start, and it was the first step along the way. 1 step closer to Jackson Jobe getting to the big leagues. That's kind of how I look at it. But he does have some things to clean up, hopefully before spring training, if he really wants to vie for a spot on the 2025 opening day roster.
Adversity, always a good thing for a prospect. Keeps you humble, keeps you working, keeps you improving. All right, it's going to be a fun week. It's time to get out of here. I want to remind everybody to please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, you name it, especially YouTube. You can find us on YouTube. You can listen to us without seeing one handsome face, one old face. You can always find us embedded in every Evan Petzold article at thefreep.com all the time. I'd like to thank Free Press editor Nicole Avery Nichols and our producer, the man who saves us every time, the magic man, Robin Chan. Love to my grandson. And shout out to Savannah Petzold. Till next week, peace.